How long do you think Seattle in those few blocks looks like this?
I don't know. We could have the summer of love.
Well, tell that to the police, who was supposed to be in that precinct, though. But I understand your sentiment, Mayor.
Hey everybody, sorry I made a video in a really long time. I mean, I don't want to disappoint any of my fans. All 7 of them. No. My fans were hoping I'd never make a video ever again. Have you guys heard what's been going on in major cities across the world? It's a real riot. And what's really funny about these protests is that thousands of small businesses have been burned to the ground and at least 20 innocent people have been killed. 20 innocent people have been killed. Duty! Alright, I'm out of here. You've been great. Thank you. Now, I have a more general video idea that this applies to. I'm going to call it TeamSpeak, sort of like 1984. But I guess I should chime in on, the historic events. Some stupid shit. So I guess I'll make a video on these protests. Now, there's a lot to say, but I should probably rapid fire it so that way people don't start calling me names and think that I'm on one of the two sides. So, rapid fire! Rapid fire! I don't like police brutality. Rapid fire! I don't like violence. Rapid fire! I don't support abuse by the police. Rapid fire! I don't support abuse of the police. Rapid fire! I don't support involving innocent people in your problems. Rapid fire! I don't like George Floyd because he was a violent person. Rapid fire! I don't like Derek Chapin, whatever hell his name is, because he is a violent person. Rapid fire! George Floyd shouldn't have been killed by the police even if he was on drugs or a violent person. Rapid fire! After the first few deaths due to these protests which turned to riots, everyone who continues to be involved with them is now responsible for future deaths. Rapid fire! Abolishing the police is retarded. Rapid fire! Police are supposed to protect and serve, not shoot tear gas at people's porches. Rapid fire! If you support both coronavirus lockdowns and protests, then you're a hypocritical asshole. Now see, that was a lot, but somehow all of these things can be true at the same time, regardless of what people on Twitter seem to think. Now I know Twitter's evil, but every once in a while, you like to get the pulse of the biggest idiots in society, see what they're talking about. So you log on every once in a while. And so I says to this person, I says, you can't really abolish the police, because the police are essentially security forces. You can't just get rid of that. They'll just make new ones, or they'll hire their own. They'll change the name of it, and they'll make a new security force, or they'll hire their own for themselves, the people in charge of your money. So saying abolish the police doesn't make any sense, because you're always going to have that job in society at some level. But I'm trying to play devil's advocate with the person, trying to be on their side. So I say, oh, well, if you want to reform the police, meaningful reform, that's fine. But you can't go down burning down the courthouse. You can't burn down buildings and trash small businesses and get people hurt and riot and loot and destroy things because you want to prove a point. That's not how you go about proving a point. You want to reform the police? You want meaningful reform? Fine. Go right ahead and do that. But you can't burn down the courthouse. And it's funny because they go, oh, well, property can be replaced, but lives can't. Then I refer to them David Dorn, a black guy who was killed by these people. Your account has been suspended. Me! I'm the one who got suspended. The person that's calling for peace and meaningful police reform and calm discourse is banned, while the person who belittles the murder of 20 people is probably totally fine. Yes, Twitter, ban the one that says please don't burn down the courthouse. Now, I knew Twitter was an evil left-wing cesspit before, but I mean, come on, at what point is this considered seditious? Twitter is deliberately silencing voices of reason and peace to promote voices of violence and complacency about murder. This whole situation is being co-opted by people who like divides, and the people who control the media narrative are making it so crystal clear that they don't want anyone to agree on anything. They just like the disagreements. They like the fight. Now a little bit about TeamSpeak. What TeamSpeak essentially is when you create large categories and you start putting traits into them, and you have to pick one, and once you pick one, you get every other trait within those spheres. And I don't think that's a fair way that you can treat people's opinions. You can't force me to agree with the worst parts of your argument by pretending I'm either with you or against you. I can have two beliefs. Police brutality and rioting are both wrong. And enough about peaceful protesting. I'm so sick and tired of hearing that term. After all the damage that's been caused, if you still call this a peaceful protest, you're a fucking idiot. Or you're just being willfully ignorant because you like the idea of saying, look, they were peaceful. You want to use the logic of Black Lives Matter here real quick. An 8-year-old girl was killed by Black Lives Matter people just a few days ago. An 8-year-old black girl was gunned down and killed. A 16-year-old black boy was gunned down and killed by Black Lives Matter people. Another couple people have been shot and killed by Black Lives Matter people. Black people. So I don't really think this is about Black Lives Matter. I think this is about the idea of that political organization getting its way. Making its point. Because they don't really seem to want to make the point that Black Lives Matter when it's other people who aren't on their side. When you're not on their side, they don't give a shit about your life. They only care about people on their side. They don't give a shit about these people's lives because it makes them look bad. So it isn't Black Lives Matter, it's our lives matter. And if you're not on our team, then you're not one of us and your life doesn't matter, apparently. Let's use the logic that got Black Lives Matter on the street to get them off the street. Oh, it's just a couple bad apples, right? There's only just a few bad apples in the police department, but we should defund the police department and reform the whole thing because of a few bad apples. Okay, there's a couple bad apples in Black Lives Matter. Let's defund the whole organization and reform it completely because apparently there's a couple bad apples and we gotta do something about this. Maybe Black Lives Matter has a systemic racial problem. Maybe Black Lives Matter has a systemic racism problem with killing black people. Just like the cops. You want to reform, defund the cops? Let's do the same thing to the other organization that's killing black people in the street. Everyone has the right to peaceably assemble. Well, up until coronavirus, of course. But now they can, though, for a reason. So you're allowed to assemble, and you're allowed to protest, but you're not allowed to throw rocks and burn things. If everyone around you is rioting and you don't leave, you are now a rioter. If you're standing in a group of people spray painting graffiti and tearing down statues and throwing rocks and setting fires, and you get hit with a rubber bullet, wrong place, wrong time, buddy. Why are you standing there? Don't get a front seat at SeaWorld and then complain when you get wet. Oh, the cop shot me with a rubber bullet just because I'm standing next to these 75 people who are robbing the Macy's. Well, Macy's isn't around anymore. But 75 people who were robbing the Nike store, and I got hit with a rubber bullet. Well, you shouldn't have been hanging around them. And well, I can have an opinion on this subject because of the color of my skin. I'm not responsible for anything that any other person does, no matter what their race is. And a black person is not responsible for anything that any other black people do, regardless of what their race is. I am not responsible for institutionalized racism. I don't even know what that means. But I'm not responsible for that. I don't even know what that is. I go to work and I fix sinks, guy. I remodel bathrooms and kitchens and stuff. I don't go around creating power structures to oppress people. And on the same token, I don't blame black people for everything that black people do. There's a lot of people who like to cite crime statistics and go, oh, look at all the crime that black people commit. So therefore, no, not therefore. You can't judge somebody individually based on the aggregate of people like them. That doesn't make any sense, and that's unfair. It's a fallacy, and I don't agree with it. Black people aren't responsible for black crime. White people are not responsible for institutionalized racism. For the people who don't like racism, they sure do say a lot of racist shit. So those people I got my problems with. But I also have a problem with a lot of the things that the police are doing. If you're police, you have a job to do. Protect and serve. Not enforce the law on people. You're supposed to protect and serve citizens on the way from when they've been accused of the crime, detained, brought to the court, in front of a judge and a jury, and then they enforce the law. You're supposed to protect and serve citizens, not shoot tear gas at their porches. A guy on his porch yelling at you is absolutely not a situation in which you shoot tear gas grenades at his house. You aren't helping with this shit. And just like the rioters shouldn't be supporting their bad actors, you shouldn't be supporting yours either. You should be able to cross the thin blue line every once in a while. If you see an officer doing something wrong, you should be able to say something because it makes all of you look bad when that happens. Just like these people are being held responsible for what those around them do who they choose to associate with, you too are being held responsible for who you choose to associate with. If you see an officer doing something wrong, you should be able to cross that thin blue line and put a stop to it. Both sides are right in some ways, but both sides are very wrong in some other ways. I don't have to hate black people to like the police. I don't have to hate the police in order to like black people. A person can think two things. I think one thing. Violence against nonviolent people is wrong. And I'm talking to both of you. So peace out, boom!